Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood before the giant screen in the war room deep inside Lunar Command and watched the alien ships floating in space around Earth like dark metal clouds. For 3 months now, these ships had blocked every way in and out of the solar system, and no human ship could leave or enter. The aliens called themselves the Dominion, and they had come from far across the galaxy with one simple message for humanity. The screen flickered and suddenly showed the face of something that was not human at all. The creature looked like it, was made of living crystal with sharp edges that caught the light and threw it back in cold blue flashes. Its voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once when it spoke. "I am Supreme Overlord Vexthanor of the Dominion Forces, and I speak for 12 great species that rule over 2,000 worlds across the galaxy," the alien said, and its crystal face did not move like a human face would when talking. "Your species has exactly 72 hours to surrender without any conditions, or we will destroy every living thing on your planet and turn your world into dust." Admiral Park felt his hands become tight fists, but he did not let his face show any fear. Around him in the war room, other officers and scientists watched the screen with worried faces. They all knew that Earth's fleet of 847 ships could not fight against the alien Armada, that had over 10,000 vessels, and each one was bigger and more powerful than anything humans had ever built. The alien continued, speaking in its cold voice that made the air in the room feel heavy. "We know you have weapons, but they are like stones thrown at mountains compared to our power. We know you have brave soldiers, but they are like children playing war games compared to our warriors who have conquered star systems while your species was still learning to make fire. You cannot win and you cannot escape, so you will surrender or you will die." The transmission ended, and the screen went dark, leaving everyone in the war room standing in silence. Admiral Park turned to look at the other people in the room and saw fear in their eyes, but also something else that made him feel proud to be human. He saw anger, and he saw the kind of stubbornness that had helped humanity survive ice ages and world wars and every other terrible thing that had tried to destroy them. "Get me a connection to President Kim," Admiral Park said to his communications officer, "and send word to all fleet commanders that we need an emergency meeting in 1 hour." While his orders were being carried out, Admiral Park walked to the big window that looked out at Earth floating blue and white in the darkness of space. Somewhere down there on that beautiful world were 8 billion people who had no idea that in 72 hours they might all be dead. Children were playing in parks, and lovers were holding hands, and old people were feeding birds in the morning sun. And none of them knew that alien ships filled with weapons beyond imagination were waiting to kill them all. The door to the war room opened, and President So-Young Kim walked in with her advisors following behind her. She was a small woman, but when she spoke, everyone listened because her voice was strong and her eyes were sharp like a hawk watching for prey. She had led the global government for 6 years now, and had never backed down from any fight, no matter how dangerous it seemed. "Admiral Park," President Kim said as she walked up to him, "tell me we have some kind of plan, because I refuse to believe that humanity has come this far just to give up now." "Madam President," Admiral Park replied, and his voice was steady, even though his heart was beating fast. "Our conventional forces cannot win this fight. Every computer model shows the same result. Even if we used every nuclear weapon on Earth and every ship in our fleet, we would maybe destroy 1/10 of their armada before they wiped us out completely." Defense Minister Jae-min Lee stepped forward, and his face was pale but determined. "Then we have to negotiate," he said. "Maybe we can make some kind of deal with them. Maybe they will let some of us live if we give them what they want, President." Kim turned to look at him with eyes that could cut glass. "And what do you think they want, Minister Lee? Do you think they traveled across the galaxy just to have a conversation with us? They want our world and our resources and probably our people as slaves. There is nothing to negotiate." Admiral Park nodded and then said something that made everyone in the room stop breathing for a moment. "There might be another way," he said quietly. "But it would require us to do something that has never been tried before, and the chances of success are very small." Before anyone could ask what he meant, a new voice spoke from the doorway. "The chances are better than you think," Admiral said. Dr. Yoonji Choi, as she walked into the room carrying a data pad that was glowing with strange symbols and numbers. She was the head of the Advanced Research Division and one of the smartest people who had ever lived. But most of the government officials did not even know she existed. President Kim looked at the woman with surprise. "Dr. Choi, what are you doing here? And how did you get past security?" Dr. Choi smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "Madam President, I have been working on something for 15 years that might save our world, but I needed to wait until the right moment to tell anyone about it. I think that moment has come." She activated her datapad, and suddenly the air above it showed a hologram of a strange-looking ship that seemed to bend light around itself like water bending around a stone. The ship was sleek and dark and looked like nothing any human had ever built before. "This is a prototype vessel called Silent Thunder," Dr. Choi said as everyone stared at the hologram. "It uses technology that we found in a crashed alien ship in the outer solar system 20 years ago. We have been studying that technology and learning how to make it work with human engineering." Admiral Park felt his heart start beating faster. "What kind of technology, Doctor?" "Stealth systems that make our ships invisible to their sensors. Weapons that can pass through their shields. Engines that are 10 times faster than anything we have now. And most important of all, we have been building these ships in secret for the past 5 years." The room became very quiet as everyone tried to understand what they were hearing. President Kim was the first to speak. "How many ships, Doctor?" 200 vessels, Madam President, all hidden in bases throughout the outer solar system, where the aliens cannot detect them. Each ship is crewed by volunteers who think they have been part of a training exercise, but they are actually the most skilled pilots and soldiers in our entire military." Defense Minister Lee shook his head. "Even 200 ships cannot defeat 10,000 alien vessels." Dr. Choi's smile became wider and more dangerous. "They can if the aliens never see them coming and never know what hit them until it is too late." Admiral Park walked closer to the hologram and studied the strange ship design. "This is why you wanted us to appear weak," he said, suddenly understanding. "You want them to think we are helpless so they will not be ready for an attack." "Exactly," Dr. Choi said. "Let them think we are going to surrender. Let them bring their ships close to Earth and relax their guard. Then we strike from the shadows with weapons they have never seen, and tactics they cannot predict." President Kim looked at each person in the room and saw hope beginning to replace fear in their eyes. "How long do we have to prepare?" "The Shadow Fleet is already in position," Dr. Choi said. "All we need now is your order to begin the final phase." Outside the window, Earth continued to turn in its slow dance around the sun, while alien ships waited for humanity to give up and accept slavery or death. But deep in the darkness between the planet's human ships were moving into position like hunters preparing to strike. The aliens thought they were waiting for Earth's surrender, but they were about to learn that humans had other plans. President So-Young Kim walked slowly to the podium in the Global Assembly Hall and looked out at the faces of representatives from every nation on Earth. The cameras were rolling, and she knew that her words would be heard not just by the 8 billion people on her world but also by the alien ships floating in orbit above them. She had to make this look real, or everything would fail before it even started. "My fellow humans," she began, and her voice was heavy with what sounded like defeat. "After 3 days of discussions with our military leaders and scientific advisors, I have reached a conclusion that breaks my heart. We cannot win a war against the Dominion forces. Their technology is too advanced, and their numbers are too great. If we fight them, we will all die and our beautiful world will be destroyed." The representatives in the hall began to murmur, and some of them started crying. President Kim raised her hand for silence and continued with the most difficult speech she had ever given. "Therefore, I am announcing that Earth will surrender to the Dominion unconditionally. The ceremony will take place in 3 days at sunrise, in Geneva. I pray that history will understand why we made this choice and forgive us for not being strong enough to resist." The broadcast ended, and across Earth people watched their leader apparently give up hope. In homes and offices and schools, humans hung their heads in shame and despair, not knowing that this was all part of a plan that might save them all. The aliens intercepted the broadcast as President Kim knew they would, and Supreme Overlord Vexithaner was pleased that the humans had finally seen reason. But in secret locations across the solar system, a very different kind of preparation was taking place. Admiral Hyunwoo Park sent coded messages to resistance cells on Mars and the asteroid belt and the moons of Jupiter telling them that Operation Shadow Dawn was now active. These messages looked like routine supply reports to any alien sensors that might intercept them, but the humans who received them knew exactly what they meant. On a dark asteroid called Ceres, Captain Dong-Hyun Ko stood in the command center of his secret base and looked at the 200 ships floating in the shadows around him. Each vessel was a masterpiece of hybrid technology that combined human creativity with alien science in ways that neither species had ever imagined possible. The ships were long and sleek like knives made of darkness, and when their stealth systems were active, they became invisible to every kind of sensor the Dominion possessed. All captains report to the briefing room, Captain Ko announced over the base communication system. It is time you learned what you have really been training for. The Shadow Fleet commanders filed into the room and took their seats, not knowing that their lives were about to change forever. These men and women were the best pilots and tacticians that humanity had ever produced, but for months, they had believed they were part of an advanced training program designed to test new ship designs and combat tactics. Captain Ko activated a holographic display that showed the alien fleet surrounding Earth, and the faces of his officers went pale as they realized what they were looking at. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a voice that was calm but deadly serious, "Earth is about to be invaded by an alien armada that wants to enslave our entire species. In 3 days we are going to stop them." Lieutenant Commander Ye-Jin Han was the youngest captain in the room at only 28 years old, but she had scored higher on every test and simulation than officers with twice her experience. She raised her hand and asked the question that everyone was thinking. "Sir, how can 200 ships defeat 10,000 alien vessels?" Captain Ko smiled, and the expression on his face reminded everyone in the room why he had been chosen to lead this mission. "Because they will never see us coming, Commander Han. Our ships are invisible to their sensors and our weapons can destroy them in ways they cannot defend against. We are not going to fight them in open battle. We are going to hunt them like shadows in the night." He activated another display that showed technical details about the Shadow Fleet weapons, and the officers stared in amazement at what they saw. Gravity bombs that could tear holes in space itself. Phase torpedoes that passed through enemy shields like they were made of air. Neural disruptors that could shut down alien computer systems and leave their ships dead in space. For 15 years, our scientists have been studying crashed alien technology and learning its secrets, Captain Ko continued. They have created weapons that the Dominion has never seen before, and armor that can protect us from their most powerful attacks. But most importantly, they have given us the ability to appear and disappear at will. Meanwhile, in her laboratory on Titan, Dr. Yoonji Choi was making final preparations for the battle that would decide the fate of humanity. She stood before a massive quantum computer that was connected to every Shadow Fleet ship through instantaneous communication links that worked faster than light itself. This system would allow the scattered human vessels to fight as one coordinated force even across the vast distances of space. "Run final diagnostics on all stealth systems," she ordered her team of scientists and engineers. "Check every weapon system twice and make sure the phase generators are calibrated perfectly. We will only get one chance at this and everything must work exactly as planned." Her assistant brought her a cup of coffee and she realized that her hands were shaking slightly as she took it. For 15 years, she had worked toward this moment, dreaming of the day when humanity could strike back against any threat from the stars. Now that day had come, and she was terrified that something might go wrong. The alien fleet above Earth was positioning itself for the surrender ceremony with Supreme Overlord Vex Thanor's massive command ship taking a place of honor directly above the Swiss city where the event would take place. Thousands of smaller vessels spread out around the planet like a metal net, ready to capture or destroy anyone who tried to escape. The aliens were confident that the humans had given up and that this primitive species would soon join the long list of worlds that bowed before Dominion power. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated the creativity and stubbornness that had allowed humanity to survive every disaster and overcome every enemy throughout their long history. They thought that superior technology and overwhelming numbers would be enough. to break the human spirit, but they had never faced a species that specialized in finding new ways to fight impossible battles. On the hidden base at Ceres, the Shadow Fleet crews were boarding their ships and running through final system checks. Each vessel carried a crew of only 50 people, compared to the thousands that served on traditional warships. But these humans were specially trained to operate the advanced hybrid technology that made their ships so deadly. Lieutenant Commander Yejin Han walked through the corridors of her ship Silent Thunder and felt the strange humming sensation that came from the alien engines that powered the vessel. The ship felt alive in a way that human technology never did, as if the hybrid systems had created something that was more than the sum of its parts. She took her place in the captain's chair and looked around the bridge at her crew of young officers, who trusted her to lead them into the most dangerous mission in human history. "All stations report ready," she announced as the final countdown began. In a few hours, the fake surrender ceremony would begin, and the real war would start. Around her, throughout the solar system, 200 ghost ships were preparing to strike from the shadows and show the galaxy that humanity would never surrender without a fight. The aliens waited for Earth's submission, but instead, they were about to face the unleashing of humanity's greatest weapon, not superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but the refusal to accept defeat and the determination to find a way to win no matter how impossible the odds might seem. The sun was just beginning to rise over Geneva when President So-Young Kim walked into the Global Assembly Hall for what everyone believed would be the darkest moment in human history. The building was filled with alien representatives from all 12 species of the Dominion, and their strange forms cast weird shadows on the walls in the early morning light. Some looked like walking crystals, while others appeared to be made of liquid metal that flowed and shifted as they moved. Supreme Overlord Vexthanor materialized in the center of the hall in a flash of blue energy that made the air smell like lightning and burning metal. His crystal body was twice as tall as any human, and the sharp edges of his form reflected the lights in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Behind him stood representatives of the other ruling species, each one more alien and frightening than the last human leader. Vexthanor said in his voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You have made the correct choice in surrendering to the power of the Dominion. Your species will be processed and assigned roles that serve the greater good of our empire. Your world will become a resource extraction site, and your people will work to support the expansion of our civilization across the galaxy." President Kim walked slowly toward the podium where the surrender documents waited for her signature. Her hands appeared to be shaking, and her face was pale as if she was about to be sick. The cameras captured every moment of her apparent humiliation and broadcast it to every corner of Earth and out into space where the alien fleet could see humanity's final defeat. She reached for the documents and her fingers touched the paper, but instead of signing her name, she pressed a hidden button built into the podium. The signal went out instantly, traveling faster than light through quantum. "Communication channels to every Shadow Fleet ship waiting in the darkness between the planets. Shadow Dawn" was the code phrase that would change everything. Captain Dong Hyun Ko received the signal aboard his flagship Dark Vengeance as it hung invisible in space directly beneath the massive alien command ship that carried Supreme Overlord Vexthanor. For months his vessel had been hiding here using stealth systems that bent light and energy around its hull, making it completely undetectable to Dominion sensors. "All weapons armed," he announced to his crew. "Target the command ship's central core. Fire gravity bomb." The weapon that launched from Dark Vengeance was unlike anything that had ever been used in space combat before. Instead of exploding with fire or radiation, it created a tiny black hole that lasted for only a fraction of a second, but in that brief moment it pulled everything nearby into a point of infinite density. The alien command ship, which was 3 kilometers long and carried 50,000 crew members, simply collapsed into itself and disappeared in a flash of twisted spacetime. Supreme Overlord Vexthanor died instantly along with every other being on his vessel, and the other aliens in the assembly hall on Earth suddenly found themselves cut off from their fleet command structure. Before they could react to what had happened, the rest of the Shadow Fleet struck from every direction at once. Lieutenant Commander Ye Jin Han brought Silent Thunder out of stealth directly alongside a Dominion battleship that was 10 times larger than her vessel. The alien ship's shields were designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, but they could do nothing against phase torpedoes that existed partially outside of normal space. Her weapons passed through the enemy's defenses like they were made of air and detonated inside the ship's hull. "Phase torpedoes away," she reported as explosions began to tear through the alien vessel from the inside. "Target destroyed." All around Earth's orbit, the same scene was playing out as Shadow Fleet ships appeared from nowhere to strike at enemies that had no idea they were under attack. The aliens had been so confident in their overwhelming superiority that they had not bothered to maintain battle stations or keep their weapons ready. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. Dr. Yoonji Choi watched the battle from her command center on Titan as data flowed in from every Shadow Fleet vessel through the quantum communication network. The hybrid weapons were performing even better than her computer models had predicted, and the alien fleet was being torn apart with surgical precision. "Neural disruptor strikes are shutting down their AI systems," reported one of her technicians. 17 alien ships are dead in space with no power or life support. "Gravity bombs are creating cascade failures in their shield generators," called another scientist. "Once we breach their defenses, the phase torpedoes are devastatingly effective." Dr. Choi allowed herself a small smile as she watched the tactical display show alien ships disappearing one by one. For 15 years she had dreamed of this moment when humanity's creativity and determination would prove stronger than alien technology and superior numbers. The Dominion fleet tried to respond, but they were fighting an enemy they could not see or understand. Their sensors showed empty space even as their ships exploded around them. Their weapons could not lock onto targets that phased in and out of normal reality. Their commanders screamed orders, but their communication networks were being jammed by human devices that used the aliens' own technology against them. Admiral Hyunwoo Park watched from Lunar Command as the tide of battle shifted in humanity's favor. The display screen showed hundreds of alien vessels either destroyed or disabled, while the Shadow Fleet had lost only 3 ships to lucky hits from enemies firing blindly into space. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we are receiving surrender requests from multiple alien vessels. They are asking for mercy." Admiral Park thought for a moment about the ultimatum the aliens had given Earth just days before. They had demanded unconditional surrender and threatened to destroy every living thing on the planet. Now they were begging for the same mercy they had refused to show. "Tell them that any ship that powers down its weapons and agrees to be boarded will be spared," he decided. "But any vessel that continues to fight will be destroyed without warning." The battle continued for 6 hours as the Shadow Fleet methodically hunted down every alien ship in the solar system. Some Dominion vessels tried to flee, but found their escape routes blocked by invisible human ships that seemed to appear from nowhere. Others attempted to fight to the end, but their weapons were useless against enemies they could not detect or target. By the time the sun set over Earth, the alien fleet that had come to accept humanity's surrender had been completely destroyed or captured. More than 8,000 alien vessels floated dead in space around the planet, while their crews either evacuated to human prison ships or died when their life support systems failed. Captain Dong-Hyun Ko brought his ship out of stealth and looked at the debris field that had once been the mighty Dominion Armada. Pieces of alien metal and crystal drifted through space like a strange metallic snow, while human rescue ships moved among the wreckage looking for survivors. "All Shadow Fleet vessels report mission accomplished," he announced over the communication network. "Earth is secure." But even as humanity celebrated its impossible victory, everyone knew that this was only the beginning. The fleet they had destroyed was just a tiny fraction of the Dominion's total military power, and somewhere in the depths of space, much larger forces were already mobilizing to avenge this defeat. Lieutenant Commander Ye Jin Han stood on the bridge of Silent Thunder and looked out at the stars, knowing that soon those distant suns would see the fires of war as the conflict spread across the galaxy. Humanity had shown that they could fight and win against impossible odds, but the real test was still to come. The aliens had waited for Earth's surrender, but instead they had unleashed something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They had awakened a species that refused to accept defeat, and had given them a reason to take their fight to the stars. News of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass and on every world controlled by the Dominion. The impossible story was whispered in secret places where the alien overlords could not hear. For the first time in 1,000 years of conquest, a primitive species had not only resisted the mighty Dominion fleet, but had completely destroyed it without losing more than a handful of their own ships. On the capital world of Nexus Prime, the 12 ruling species of the Dominion gathered in emergency session inside a crystal palace that floated high above the planet's surface. The building itself was a symbol of their power, made from the compressed remains of stars they had destroyed and filled with treasures stolen from 2,000 conquered worlds. Archon Kethmaran of the Hegemony military was a creature that looked like a walking mountain of black stone with eyes like burning coals set deep in its rocky face. When it spoke, the voice rumbled like an earthquake and made the crystal walls of the palace shake with each word. The humans have made themselves a Class Omega threat, the Archon declared as holographic images of the destroyed fleet played in the air above the assembly. Never before has a species achieved victory against our forces using weapons we cannot understand or defend against. They must be eliminated completely before their technology spreads to other worlds. The other Dominion leaders nodded in agreement as they watched recordings of human ships appearing and disappearing like ghosts in the darkness of space. Their weapons passed through shields that had never been breached, and their stealth systems made them invisible to sensors that could detect a single atom from light years away. "Deploy the core fleet," commanded Supreme Chancellor Velthera, whose body was made of liquid silver that constantly flowed and reformed itself. 5,000 of our most advanced warships with weapons that can crack planets and shields that can stop supernovas. The humans must learn what happens when someone challenges the power of the Dominion. But while the alien rulers planned their revenge, Earth was not sitting still and waiting for the next attack. President So-Young Kim had authorized the most ambitious expansion of human military power in history. And across the solar system, new shipyards were working day and night to build more Shadow Fleet vessels. Admiral Hunwoo Park stood in the construction bay of the Luna 7 facility and watched as teams of human and alien engineers worked together to create the next generation of stealth warships. The aliens were prisoners captured during the recent battle, but many of them had volunteered to help build defenses against their former masters. The Zephyrian engineer says he can improve our phase torpedo systems by 30%, reported Dr. Yoonji Choi as she joined him on the observation platform. And the crystalline prisoners have shown us how to make our stealth fields even more effective. Admiral Park nodded, but his expression remained serious. How many ships can we have? Ready before the Dominion sends their next fleet. 2,000 Shadow Fleet vessels within 6 months, Dr. Choi replied. But Admiral, we both know that will not be enough if they send their core fleet against us. Intelligence reports suggest they have weapons that make their previous armada look like toys. Meanwhile, Captain Dong-hyun Ko was leading the first Shadow Fleet expedition beyond the solar system to carry the fight directly to Dominion territory. His target was Kepler 442c, a mining world where human slaves had been working in underground tunnels for over 50 years after being captured during early exploration missions. The Dark Vengeance and 20 other Shadow Fleet ships materialized in orbit around the planet without warning and immediately began attacking the Dominion garrison forces. The alien soldiers on the surface had never seen weapons like the ones the humans carried, and their defensive positions were destroyed within minutes. All mining facilities are secured, reported Lieutenant Commander Ye-Jin Han from the surface, where she was leading a team of Marines through the underground tunnels. We have found over 3,000 human prisoners, and they are all alive. But the rescued humans were not the only ones who cheered when the Shadow Fleet arrived. The planet was also home to several other species that had been enslaved by the Dominion, and they immediately joined the rebellion when they saw that someone was finally fighting back against their oppressors. "Captain," called his communications officer from the bridge of Dark Vengeance. "We are receiving surrender offers from Dominion garrisons on 12 other worlds in this sector. Word of our victory here has spread, and the alien commanders are afraid to fight us." Captain Ko smiled as he realized that fear was spreading through Dominion space faster than their ships could travel. For 1,000 years, the aliens had conquered through intimidation and superior technology, but now they were learning what it felt like to be afraid. Dr. Yoonji Choi's research teams were making new discoveries with each captured alien ship and every piece of enemy technology they studied. The hybrid weapons that had won the battle for Earth were just the beginning, and already her scientists were developing even more advanced systems. The new quantum disruptor can shut down an entire enemy fleet from a single shot, she explained to President Kim during a briefing in the underground command center beneath Seoul. And our dimensional phase drives will allow Shadow Fleet ships to appear anywhere in the galaxy within hours instead of weeks. President Kim studied the technical readouts, but her attention was focused on something else entirely. Doctor, what? About the intelligence we captured from their command ships. Have you learned anything about their total military strength? Dr. Choi's expression became grim as she activated a holographic display that showed the true scope of the Dominion Empire. Madam President, their core fleet alone has 5,000 ships, each one more advanced than anything we faced during the first battle. Beyond that, they have reserve fleets totaling over 100,000 vessels scattered across their territory. The numbers were staggering, but President Kim had not become the leader of Earth by backing down from impossible challenges. Then, we will have to make sure we never fight them in a fair battle, she said firmly. The Shadow Fleet will continue to strike from ambush and disappear before they can respond. We will turn their own size against them by making it impossible for them to know where we will attack next. Lieutenant Commander Ye Jin Han had been promoted to full captain after her heroic performance during the liberation of Kepler 442c, and now she commanded an entire wing of Shadow Fleet vessels. Her ships were patrolling the outer edges of Dominion space looking for targets of opportunity and spreading the word that humanity was actively fighting against the alien empire. Captain, reported her sensor officer aboard the upgraded Silent Thunder. Long-range scans are detecting a massive fleet movement in the Vega sector. At least 5,000 ships heading toward the Sol system. Captain Han felt her blood turn cold as she realized what this meant. The Dominion core fleet was finally coming to finish what their advance forces had failed to accomplish. Earth had, maybe 3 weeks before the aliens arrived in overwhelming numbers with weapons that could destroy entire planets. She activated her quantum communicator and sent an urgent message back to Earth, warning of the approaching threat. All across human space, the alarm was raised as every available ship began moving toward the solar system to prepare for the battle that would determine the future of both species. But humanity had learned something important during their recent victories. They had discovered that the key to defeating a superior enemy was not to fight them on their own terms, but to change the rules of combat completely. The Dominion expected another fleet battle like the ones they had won for 1,000 years, but they were about to face something entirely different. The Shadow Fleet was no longer just a collection of individual ships, but had evolved into something new and deadly. They had become a single coordinated weapon that could strike anywhere in the galaxy and disappear before the enemy could react. Soon the aliens would learn that hunting humanity was like trying to catch shadows with their bare hands. The real war was about to begin. The Dominion core fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system like a wall of metal and death that stretched across space from one side to the other. 5,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy moved in perfect formation toward Earth while their weapons charged with enough power to turn entire moons into dust and vapor. Supreme War Marshal Zeph Kiros commanded the fleet from his flagship Eternal Dominance, which was the size of a small city, and carried weapons that could crack planets in half with a single shot. The War Marshal was ancient even by Dominion standards, and had personally led the conquest of over 300 worlds during his long military career. Begin planetary bombardment the moment we reach optimal range, he ordered his fleet commanders. No surrender will be accepted this time. Every human will be eliminated, and their world will serve as an example to any other species that thinks they can resist our power. But Earth was not the same world the Dominion had first threatened 6 months ago. The planet was now surrounded by the largest defensive network in human history, with orbital weapons platforms and shield generators that used hybrid technology to create barriers stronger than anything previously imagined. Admiral Hyunwoo Park stood on the bridge of his new flagship Earth's Defiance, which was itself a masterpiece of human and alien engineering, combined into something that neither species could have created alone. The ship was 3 times larger than any previous human vessel, but it could still become completely invisible to enemy sensors when its stealth systems were activated. Shadow Armada status report, he requested, as the alien fleet approached the outer planets. 3,000 stealth vessels in position throughout the solar system, reported his tactical officer. Another 2,000 ships are stationed at key points across Dominion space ready to strike their home worlds when you give the signal. The Shadow Fleet had grown into something far beyond what anyone had originally imagined. It was no longer just a collection of individual ships but had become a single coordinated weapon that could fight battles across multiple star systems simultaneously using quantum communication networks that connected every vessel instantly, regardless of distance. Dr. Eunji Choi watched the approaching battle from her command center, which had been moved to a heavily defended asteroid in the belt between Mars and Jupiter. Around her, teams of human and alien scientists monitored the performance of weapons and defensive systems that represented the peak of hybrid technology. Phase torpedo production is at maximum capacity, she reported to Admiral Park through their secure communication link. Every Shadow Fleet ship is carrying enough firepower to destroy targets 50 times their size. What about the new dimensional weapons, Doctor? Dr. Choi smiled as she activated a display showing her latest creation. The reality bombs are ready, Admiral. If the Dominion wants to bring their entire core fleet into our solar system, we can make sure they never leave. Meanwhile, Captain Dong-Hyun Ko was leading a strike force of 500 Shadow Fleet vessels in a desperate attack on the Dominion capital world of Nexus Prime. His mission was to create enough chaos and destruction in the enemy's home territory to force them to recall part of their core fleet from the assault on Earth. All ships prepare for dimensional phase, he announced, as his fleet approached the heavily defended alien world. Remember, we only need to hold their attention for 6 hours, then we retreat to the secondary positions. The Dark Vengeance and its escort ships materialized directly above Nexus Prime's capital city, and immediately began attacking the orbital defense platforms with weapons the aliens had never seen before. Reality bombs tore holes in space itself, while phase torpedoes passed through planetary shields to strike targets on the surface below. Captain Yejin Han commanded the defense of Earth itself with a wing of the most advanced Shadow Fleet vessels ever built. Her ships were positioned throughout the solar system like invisible guardians waiting to strike at any enemy that came within range of their weapons. Dominion fleet will reach optimal firing position in 30 minutes, reported her sensor officer. They are charging their planet-killing weapons. Captain Han activated her communication system and sent a message to every Shadow Fleet vessel in the solar system. All ships, this is Captain Han. Today we fight not just for Earth, but for every free species in the galaxy. Show them what happens when someone threatens humanity's home. The battle began when Supreme War Marshal Zeph Kiros ordered his fleet to open fire on Earth from maximum range. Beams of energy that could vaporize mountains lanced through space toward the blue world only to splash harmlessly against defensive shields that bent the laws of physics to protect the planet below. Impossible, the War Marshal muttered as his most powerful weapons failed to penetrate Earth's defenses. Those shields are using technology that should not exist. That was when the Shadow Armada struck from every direction at once. 3,000 invisible ships materialized around the Dominion fleet and immediately began attacking with weapons that passed through enemy shields like they were made of air. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy they could not see against weapons they could not defend against. Fleet status report, demanded War Marshal Zeph Kiros as explosions began tearing through his ships. We have lost over 1,000 vessels in the first 10 minutes, his tactical officer reported with panic in his voice. Enemy ships are appearing and disappearing faster than our sensors can track them. The Dominion had brought 5,000 of their most advanced warships to destroy Earth, but they were discovering that numbers meant nothing when fighting an enemy that could strike from any direction and vanish before return fire could be aimed. The Shadow Armada fought like a pack of wolves attacking a giant that was too slow to defend itself properly. Admiral Park watched from Earth's defiance as the alien fleet began to fall apart under the coordinated assault. All ships focus fire on their command vessels, he ordered. Cut off their leadership and the rest will surrender. Dr. Eunji Choi activated her most devastating weapon as the battle reached its climax. The reality bombs created cascading failures in space-time itself that spread through the Dominion fleet like a virus, destroying everything they touched. Entire alien battleships simply ceased to exist as the laws of physics unraveled around them. Supreme War Marshal Zeph Kairos realized that his fleet was doomed as more and more ships disappeared into holes torn in reality itself. He opened a communication channel to the human forces, and his voice carried a tone that no Dominion leader had ever used before. "What are you?" he asked as his flagship began to break apart around him. Admiral Park's response was heard across the entire battlefield and would be remembered throughout the galaxy for generations to come. "We are humanity," he said in a voice like thunder. "We are the shadows you created when you tried to block out our sun. We are the darkness that comes for tyrants, and we are your end." The War Marshal died when his flagship was consumed by a reality bomb, but his final transmission was already spreading across Dominion space, carrying news of humanity's impossible victory. The core fleet that was supposed to crush Earth's resistance had been completely destroyed by an enemy that fought like ghosts and struck like lightning. But the victory was about more than just military success. As news of the battle spread throughout the galaxy, dozens of enslaved species declared their independence from Dominion rule. Rebellion flared on 100 worlds as oppressed peoples rose up against their alien masters, knowing that humanity would come to their aid. President So Young Kim addressed the First Galactic Assembly 1 year later, as representatives from over 50 free worlds gathered on Earth to establish a new kind of government based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Shadow Fleet had become the Alliance Navy, protecting freedom wherever it was threatened. Captain Yejin Han stood on the bridge of her ship as it patrolled the outer rim of the galaxy, carrying the promise of liberation to species that had never known freedom. Each new world they discovered added to the growing alliance of the free, and the dream of a galaxy without tyrants came closer to reality. The aliens had waited for Earth's surrender, but instead, they had unleashed the shadows that would free the galaxy. Humanity had learned that the greatest weapon against tyranny was not superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but the refusal to accept defeat and the determination to fight for freedom, no matter what the cost. And in the darkness between the stars, Shadow Fleet vessels continued their eternal patrol, ready to answer the call whenever liberty was threatened, because they had learned the greatest truth of all. Freedom was not a destination, but a journey, and the price of peace was eternal vigilance against those who would take it away.